Hey, what's up guys? I know I said I was going to be diving into David Harvey's stuff, but I've actually been reading Jason Moore's book called Capitalism in the Web of Life, and he's talking about the unpaid work and labor, the appropriation of unpaid labor that is foundational to the accumulation of capital. Which I think is something that is not really discussed very much on the left. I mean, Marxist feminists discuss, the unpaid work done largely by women. But again, I don't see that many people on YouTube left anyway talking about Marxist feminism. But basically, Moore is just pointing out that capitalism turns on the exploitation of labor, and for anyone who is like, what the fuck? Labor is not exploited, everything is voluntary. I'm not even gonna touch the voluntary thing, but when I say exploitation of labor, I just mean that workers are not paid the full value of their social labor, which is how profits are produced and had, right? So capitalist reproduction turns on the exploitation of labor and the appropriation of cheap natures. And Moore calls this nature with a capital N to signify that it also includes human natures and various other things. So like I said, women, slaves, animals, other ecological services. Basically, cheap natures refers to the reproduction of life which is external to capital. And again, external is in quotes because the active externalization of nature, the idea in Western societies that there is a dichotomy between humans and nature is this thing out there that is external to our human civilizations. So the active externalization of nature allows it to be commodified, allows it to be seen as this thing that is out there that is, quantifiable, that you can break up into units of ecosystem service and, you can sell these units. Another example is national parks. Like, we view conservation as conserving these bounded spaces of wilderness over here, separate from where we are over here living our modern capitalist lives, and somehow we feel as though this is an appropriate way to conserve, or this is an appropriate, or not appropriate, but a sustainable relationship between humans and nature, thinking that this is sustainable because it's okay, we're conserving this other area over here in which we engage through, tourism and leisure. The externalization of these national parks has allowed it to be commodified, has allowed them to become spaces of consumption and tourism and accumulation for the most part. So when thinking about the law of value, or the labor theory of value, the determination of socially necessary labor time occurs simultaneously through organizational and technical innovation and through strategies of appropriating the unpaid work and energy of women, nature, and colonies. Absent massive streams of unpaid work and energy from the rest of nature, including that delivered by women, the cost of production would rise and accumulation would slow. Every act of exploitation of commodified labor power therefore depends on an even greater act of appropriation of unpaid work and energy. Wage workers are exploited, everyone else, human and extra-human, is appropriated. In other words, value does not work unless most work is not valued. So capitalism's incessant drive for expansion then is obviously to find, new frontiers of resources, new frontiers of laborers, new markets, etc., but also to find new frontiers of these cheap natures, capital N, that will provide all of this unpaid work. And for people who are wondering about, what is the unpaid work done by women, they're largely talking about domestic work, the work of raising families, etc., etc. And obviously in modern times this is changing. Obviously men are taking on a greater share of this work, but it's still largely being taken up by women. And you know, this is still obviously unpaid work that women are doing to further the capitalist system, and it obviously puts them at a disadvantage if they want to re-enter the job market, etc., etc. And in a similar vein, I also think about animals who are stuck and trapped in like the horrible industrial agriculture industry, and you know, their work, their unpaid work is to reproduce. You know, they're bred for all of these specific traits that actually harm their being, but yeah, just continue reproducing, produce these products completely unpaid, and then get slaughtered. And of course, a lot of people have tried to estimate what the actual, you know, money price value of all of this unpaid work would be. Estimates for the unpaid work performed by humans range between 70 and 80% of global GDP, and for the unpaid work performed by the rest of nature, 72 to 50% of global GDP. And Marxist feminism has argued that, you know, especially with respect to women, all of this unpaid work that they're doing is not just there, like it's not just sitting there waiting to be had, it's actively produced through relations of power and reproduction and accumulation. So some people might say this actually does illustrate one of the contradictions of capitalism, because I said I was going to talk about contradictions of capitalism in David Harvey. So, you know, it might illustrate the contradiction between exchange and use value. But this is actually kind of a dangerous road to go down, because if we say that, you know, the problem is that most things that have use value, like within nature, have no exchange value and thus no real value under capitalism, it'll lead to, or it is leading to, you know, what we're seeing now, where people are just like, okay, well, all we need to do then is just put a price on all of these ecosystem services. Like, that's all we need to do. We just need to give exchange value to all of these, you know, intricate, intimate, little, almost unquantifiable things that nature is doing, and then people will save it. I think I'll have to do a whole other video about this, because I could honestly like say so much about it. Karl Polanyi calls these, you know, fictitious commodities because they aren't actually produced for the market. They aren't actually produced through labor, and so they're, you know, our valuation of them is just completely arbitrary. And two really good articles are coming to mind. The first is The Nature That The Nature That Capital Can See by Robertson, and the second is Sean Sullivan's work looking at offsets in Namibia and England. But I'll go into those examples in another video, because they are both just like, they are just insane. It just shows how completely like piecemeal and arbitrary and just shaky and ridiculous a lot of this like science is that is determining the value of these offsets or ecosystem services. But I think I'll stop there for now. So yeah, hopefully you got something from this. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in another video.